Welcome back to Dirty Pretty, the space where we own our feelings, honor our experience, share unfiltered truths, and talk shit, all through a lens of love. Today's guest, Lina Nelson, is here to remind you that you deserve to live a life that you love and to live in a community that supports you loving your life. Her mantra, if I can do it, why not you, reinforces the foundational practices of not only what she believes, but how she lives, works, and dreams for the future. Lina's work is here to shake up the status quo and support the inner zest calling you towards joy, ease, and purpose by inviting you to defy social norms that encourage measuring success and humanity by material things. By intentionally aligning herself with a community of purpose-filled entrepreneurs on a similar mission to help humans attain physical and financial health, Lina uses core values to help others align to the life that they crave of freedom, sustainability, and holistic health. Operating under the belief that life can be drastically changed when we are unafraid to blaze a different path forward, Lina dares all to explore your inner passions and find balance through a practice she calls alkalized abundance. Welcome, Lina.
Thank you. Wow. That was powerful. I was
Oh,
like, who is she?
I want to know her. Sounds like somebody I might
Yeah,
like.
right.
Well, it's all you. All of this stuff is things that I have had the pleasure of absorbing, I think, just from knowing you a little bit, being in the mastermind together. Lena and I were in a
Yeah.
mastermind together, and I got little bits of exposure to her, right? Because somebody else is running it and you're like filling in the gaps whenever you can. But all the rest of it is you on your website, how you articulate yourself, how you express yourself. This is just me kind of moving things around a little bit. But yeah, thank you. It's all you.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on Dirty Pretty, and even just the name of this podcast is something that I think is like such a badass combination. Like, let's be dirty about it, but like hell yeah, we're still beautiful kind of thing. I love
Yes, I love that. You know what's so great is my blessing is that I get to sit on the other end and just like witness people, which is why I'm a coach. It's what I love. I'm so insatiably curious. Sometimes it annoys people, but that's the thing that I love is hearing other people's experience of what this experience is going to be about, right? And how they perceive the idea of dirty pretty. And so
it.
it's really fun for me to see, other people, yes, but also learn new things and challenge my edges that way, right? Increase my capacity that way or find triggers and stops, right? And so that's why I enjoy this conversation. So thank you for sharing that, you get it. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again. Thanks for having me.
So Lena and I, typical to anybody that has watched the Dirty Pretty Conversations and interview series before, we have conversations before we hit record. That is the privilege that we have of being on this end of the screen, and I love it for us. And so one of the things that we were talking about before we hit record was, what do you call yourself? Do you call yourself a coach? How do you identify what you do and the role that you play?
This is always an interesting one because I feel like I've always resisted being put into any sort of a box, which is why like coach, like we talked about before, how it's like, I don't know, there's kind of a stigma to it and people feel differently about it. And but again, kind of going back to the whole point of this podcast is like we're going to be honest about whatever it is, and if it offends someone or if you have an opinion about it, whatever, it's fine. Like we're still just going to move forward with who we are. So yeah, I guess I would consider myself a coach or a mentor. I kind of dabble in a lot of different things, from business, which is actually where alkalized abundance comes from, to also like mentoring, I guess, like a life coach. Again, like I put quotations around it because it's like, what even is a life coach? But I like the idea of like, again, like turning back into joy. And you mentioned this when you were introducing me. Like that to me is like, I just feel like we're here to enjoy life at the very basis of everything. And like, that's like, we can do it in so many different ways. But that's what I kind of like mentoring or coaching on, is like, there's just so many people in the world that I feel like are doing things and living their life in a way that is not true to them, and they kind of like lose that sense of joy in like their everyday life, like even in the mundane things. And so I like bringing women more specifically back to experiencing joy in everything that they do, whether or not it's like doing the fucking dishes or like going on a trip somewhere or having baby, like, whatever you want to do. It's like, can you find the joy in it? And there's so many different, like pieces to that. But I think for me, that's like, there's like this expansion in joy and this connection that you find through joy. And so, yeah, that's kind of, again, I don't know. What do I call myself? I don't know. But like do a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because I like that you said what even is a coach, right? And I think that that lends itself to whatever somebody's focus is, right? How they want to contribute to the world, what they do in terms of support or service. And I think anybody could call themselves anything. You could be
Right.
like the joy gatekeeper. That could be your job title, just kind of like
Yeah.
going off of what you said. But I really agree. I think that when we are in a state of peace, which is where my joy lives in ease, in balance. I don't hear you saying like eradicate things that are difficult, eradicate your anger, eradicate, your grief or your desperation or your depression. I don't hear you saying any of that. And I'm curious if there's a reason why you are focused on the joy. Besides what you said before of like, you feel like people are at their happiest, they're most content. I'm curious as to why that is your focus.
I think mostly just because it's like that to me is like the reason why we're here. I think we're here to like experience everything, right? We are here to experience the grief and the anger and all of this like humanness.
Mm.
But joy to me is something that I think people, at least that I notice, that people really struggle to find. And then it's
Uh,
like something where it's like we almost tend to lean more towards like the oh, like the world is so shitty and things are just like happening to me and I hate my job and whatever, but like how can we move that more towards joy? Because like we're supposed to feel all the things, but I think our resting state can be more joyful.
Yes, I agree. I feel like people are constantly looking for permission to be as happy as they can be, right?
Yeah. Oh
And
God. Yeah.
yeah, it's
The
like,
guilt that I have sometimes for being happy is like for being joyful. It's like, oh, the world is so shitty right now. I'm supposed to be concerned and depressed and sad. And like obviously I feel those things too, but like sometimes it's like there's a guilt on top of it
oh,
for
sure.
feeling happy.
Yes, and I think when we look out into the social landscape, social media wasn't always around. It's
Mm,
kind of like the scapegoat for a lot of things, I think, because it's the way that we're starting to identify things. So like it gets a bad rap, but in a lot of ways, I feel like social media reveals to us this trigger, this wounding that we have from being too happy. And now there's, the terminology attached to it is like you're tone deaf if you're expressing your joy. And it's
mm,
almost like you have to come to it with like, well, before this, I was living out of my car. And before
mm-hmm,
this, I was
mm-hmm.
abused. And before you have to come with your liturgy of shit to be
Exactly.
able to have permission to be happy. And so I
Exactly.
agree wholeheartedly with you that people are just like, they're walking skeptically and with trepidation about "Ooh, where's my line? Where's the line where I'm being just happy enough to not be, ooh, you're too depressed, get away from me, and just happy enough to not be, oh, when I are just showing off and acting superior.
Hmm.
It's so hard to find that balance. And so I'm curious if there is any reason in particular, aside from you being, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on your pronouns, she, her.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you. So is it because you identify as female that you focus on helping females with joy? Or is there any other reason?
Yeah, I think for me, I just tend to connect better to women on a general landscape, and I feel like more comfortable guiding women. I guess I've never actually tried to guide anyone else or anyone else identifying as anything else, so maybe maybe I could expand in that sense. But yeah, for me, it's like I don't know. I'm very like sisterhood oriented, so I think that for me is just like more natural.
Yeah, beautiful. My impetus for asking that question is because being a woman, I relate to other women finding it exceptionally hard to express their joy. And I'm not saying
Hmm.
that men don't. Men get a hard rap for being vulnerable. You're too weak, you're too, whatever. There's judgment there as well. But, from being a woman, I totally identify with it. It's been an uphill battle my entire life. I just turned 41. It's been my entire life trying to find the balance of joy because when or if you are brought into a world that is constantly at conflict with itself, which I believe
Mm.
our world has been that way forever because we're just all trying to figure out how to human. And as progress happens, things get better. We get wiser. We learn better. We do better. But before that, there's all the shit. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you're getting to the place of realizing, am I as happy as I could be? It's almost like you look at yourself and it's like you've been in a war, right? You've been
Mm,
trying so hard, crawling, crawling, crawling to get to joy, that any extra effort to try and get over that hump of, am I being not too happy or not happy enough, right? And you almost feel tired at that point. And so
mm,
I'm curious, when you start to work with someone who is new, do you ever find them kind of really excited to jump in, but then they back off because it's like, whoa, I didn't expect this much transformation. I didn't expect you to challenge me that much and it to trigger me
mm.
that much.
Yeah, a little bit. I do find that a lot of women that I have worked with tend to be in a sort of like survival mode. And so
Sure.
it's like, like first getting out of that's like the precursor, right? It's kind of like getting yourself out of that like survival mode, protection mode, like, not wanting to connect to anyone because you're too afraid, or like, all this fear that comes up around it before you can get to the joy. And like, obviously, you can still experience joy while you're feeling those things too. I do find that it's like the first program that I ever launched for my like from my own being whatever, like, like from my own idea, was
Yeah.
called Survive to Thrive, because I
Mm.
found that like surviving, like that's where we're going, like where a lot of us exist, is just surviving, like barely getting by, whether it's like financially, physically, like, we don't have enough time, even, all these things that pile up. And like you can't it's much harder to find a sense of self and a sense of like joy and a sense of like expansion, connection, anything when you're in that survival mode. So that was my kind of idea behind that, was like my signature program was that it's like we got to get out of survival mode first, and then we can move into this thriving energy of like joyful, even when shit hits the fan, you still have the faith, you still know that like everything's going to be all right, like that's like your baseline. But there definitely takes a lot of work to get there, to that point first.
Yeah, totally. I worked with this coach once. Her name is Aislinn. She's amazing. You can find her on social media, but I was in that place, right? I was like, I think that life could be better, like,
Yeah,
and
imagine that.
right. And you're like, it's odd because you're like, at that point, I was like, my life isn't bad. I'm like, you feel a little crunchy, you feel real constricted, you feel suffocated. You feel like at that point, you're almost like, I don't even know how to make a decision. I don't, and you
Hmm.
can't feel created because you're locked down. You're really tense. Everything is
Yep.
restricted and constricted. And in working with her, she was like, Shannon, you're in the pullback period. And it was like the greatest visual I could have ever been given because I'm a very visual person. And she said it's that point where the rubber band is so taut, it's so tense. And that's the point where you're realizing I'm in survival mode and you're looking around at what I call sitting in your shit. You're like, oh, I have this indecisive thing. I have, this self-deprecation thing. I have this victim thing. And you're just like, fuck, I'm just like so tight. I can't breathe. And that's how I felt in that space. Like I couldn't fucking breathe. And
Mm,
her example of being so taught that when you finally get the permission to let go, it's so wild how you feel. So before we get into
mm,
that, the thing I want to go back to was I had the privilege of looking at your website and knowing that before, right? And anybody watching this, typically, my experience, coach, practitioner of any kind, they get into their profession for a reason, right?
mm,
So knowing from your website that you started in a similar place and you were waitressing, right? And you were
mm-hmm.
like, listen, I got to get my shit together. So give us a little bit of taste of, okay, here's how I got to this point, right? Here's where I started. Here's what
Mm.
prompted me to be this person.
All right, how far back do you want to go? It's
Well,
like
it's like
when
mostly an
I
hour, so give us the highlights, I guess.
okay, yeah, yeah. Cool, cool, cool. Well, I mean, yeah, I would say being a college student for me was when it really started to like when I started to really feel like I was in that like pullback place of like this is just so heavy. I'm doing so much. Like full course load, working two or three jobs. I was also the president of a outdoor adventure club, which I did work for free for, and it was, I mean, amazing, like one of the best experience of my life. But it was like I was doing all these extracurriculars, working multiple jobs, had a campus job, had a waitressing job, plus had whatever 18 credit hours a semester or whatever. And so it
Oh,
was like that was really when I was truly in a state of burnout and just like continuously, trudging forward, like you were talking about. And so I think post college really what allowed me to see. So I've always been a traveler and I've loved traveling, and road trips were, when I was younger, was really like the main thing that I loved to do. Like I would go on a road trip every summer from when I graduated high school till so when I moved abroad to the Galapagos Islands.
wow.
And I kept feeling like when I was on this road trip, like this is how I was supposed to feel. Like I was so present, like nothing else where I didn't worry about a damn thing except for literally where I was gonna sleep, which like usually I would just like trust that I was gonna find somewhere, and like what I was gonna eat, which I had like, groceries in the back and a camp stove, and I just like loved that freedom. And I kept thinking like, I feel like life is supposed to feel like this. Like I'm supposed to be present. I'm supposed to feel this freedom. I'm supposed to be like following my intuition. And the only time that I ever got to do that was when I was on a road trip. So going through college, like just like basically living for the weekend and like living to like go camping with my friends and stuff. When I moved to the Galapagos Islands, so I studied abroad there, and the island that I studied at, so I studied for a whole semester. There was 1 month in Quito in the mainland of Ecuador, which is like a big city. And then we had 3 months on San Cristobal Island, which is this sleepy little like tourist surf town, and now a place where I get to call home, but that's like a whole other side of the story. So but I realized when I was there studying abroad, I was like, life is so slow here. Like I didn't have a job. I was going to school, but like I had one class a day. So I
Wow.
only had class from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then we had the entire rest of the day free. So my friends that I made, both like in the program and local, like we were just hanging out all the time. We were scuba diving, we were snorkeling, we were always on the beach. Like we were present, and it dawned on me like, whoa, okay, you actually can like live your day-to-day life like this. But it's just, for at the time I thought that it had a lot more to do with like where I was instead of like who I was, if that makes sense. So it was very location dependent for me. But when I was on the island, I was like, oh my God, this is how I feel when I'm on road trips. Like I'm actually living it for like extended amounts of time right now, like in my day-to-day life.
Mm.
And I think a huge part of it was because the island is just so slow. Like life there is just way slowed down compared to life in the US or in any other like more developed area probably. And so that really taught me to like, that there's this like simplicity and there's this connection that you can have when you slow down and when you like tune into what really brings you joy. And that those 3 months I was doing what brought me joy every single day. Like whether it was just like chilling on the beach and reading a book, love to do that, or scuba diving or surfing, like, doing more like active things, also love to do those things. But it was like this beautiful, I don't know, like awakening of some sort for me to be like, wow, okay, I can actually like live my life like this. Like I can be happy. Wow. And I don't
Yeah.
have to be bogged down by all this shit and like anxious about what I'm doing and not sure about where I'm going. And it's really interesting to me because those 3 months radically changed my life. And I guess this is kind of part of this like a important part of the story too, because so I just so happened to study abroad that the last semester of my college degree. And so all of my friends in the program were juniors. So they were all going back to school. So they had stuff to like go back to. And I didn't. So I had basically moved out of like my college house, and all my shit was in boxes. And my intention, I had literally set this intention before going to the island that I was just going to see what happens. I was like, I'm
Mm.
just not going to have a plan. And I'm just like, I'll figure my shit out when I come back to the US, but I'm just going to go and I'm going to experience being there. And so I was as present as I've ever been in my whole life. And I think about this all the time. And I didn't have a plan. I literally was like, I'm going to be here for the next 3 months. And then who fucking knows? Because of that intention, I did not worry about the future at all for those entire 3 months. Like I wasn't concerned about the fact that I didn't have a job when I went home or that I was going to be moving back in with my parents or anything. I was like, I'm just here. I'm going to enjoy this. And so I did. And lo and behold, 2 days before I was supposed to go back to the island, I got offered a job to stay and teach English at the university that I was studying at. And so
Wow.
that opportunity changed my entire life. Like now, my now husband is from the Galapagos Islands. We met 2 weeks into my study abroad. I own a house there with him. We have a dog there, and like we have a business there. We have an entire life there. And I never would have stayed there if this job hadn't of come up, but I never would have gotten the job if I hadn't had that intention of like, I'm just going to be present and enjoy life and just
Mhm.
see what happens. And then I believe that, like, the universe, God, this like greater energy that kind of brings everything together and like works in mysterious ways and synchronicities and stuff like that. I couldn't have planned that myself.
Wow.
And I think because I was so in my joy, so in my presence, that it was like, okay, here you go, bing, perfect little thing. Like there was no other option but to say yes. Like it was just a full fuck yes, as soon because I had been in that state of like pure presence and joy, and completely changed the course of my life to this day. So that to me, that's like a bit of my story, but for sure, like I always come back to that experience of like, man, I was like just so fully trusting and enjoying, like just fully enjoying and not worried about the future or the past or whatever. And like look at where it got me. So i
Wow.
have i have that what's the word, like testimony, I guess, or like conviction or whatever, like the like proof for myself that like that actually works and I've
Yeah.
experienced it. And it's hard to lean back into it because that was like just such a very interesting time of my life. And now there's all these other moving parts too, but I always try to sink back, like practice coming back to that and like, okay, everything's freaking working out, and I can my life is a living testament to that.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. That is, first of all, it's really powerful that, from a young age, you were aware that you weren't being whole, is what it sounded like. And I really appreciate the way you phrased it. I wasn't being present because that's a similar experience that I had. It was like one day I woke up and I'm like, I'm just like phoning it in everywhere. Like I'm phoning it in on my job and I'm like, shit, like this could be dangerous.
Mm,
Like I'm not listening, I'm not paying attention. And then instead of it sitting in that place of it could be dangerous, it was that. And also, why the hell am I not paying attention? Why? I'm not interested in my own life. I'm not interested in myself. And then something about that was so back ass where it's like, you don't care about yourself? You're you. What the hell do you mean?
mm,
Like it was just so my brain was like, this makes zero sense. So I appreciate that because I think that that's what coaches do. I think I'm going to say something that might be triggering, so sorry if it is. Good coaches will do that. A good coach is going to ask you to hone in on your presence because that's the only
mm.
way you understand your idiosyncrasies, your
So true.
personalities, your preferences, and your purpose, right?
Mhm.
What you're offering people, what you really bring, what I call bring people home to is when you find your presence, you'll find your purpose. And as long as you
Exactly.
have your presence, as you continue to morph through time, you'll be able to, as you said, lean back into that, snap back into that to realize, oh, yeah, I'm just in like a shitty season. Okay, how can I
Yeah.
be so I can guide myself through this because I have fucking been here before. Maybe not in this circumstance.
Mhm.
But I've had shitty moments before. So you go to the Galapagos, you decide, okay, I'm going to spend 3 months just like being present. And as you were saying that, I'm like imagining, I'm feeling the energy waves of the collective. And I used to be this way. So if you're feeling this, you're not alone. Where it's like, that's triggering. What do you mean you just decided I'm just gonna stop
Mm.
living this way and just go live on an island for 3 months and like hope
Yeah,
it all
that's
works
literally what
out?
I did.
So for
I know.
people that are watching that, like, I don't know if you remember back in that place, being in that place where you were, you felt like you're like really trying to be yourself and you're feeling so bogged down. Would you say at that moment life was going really fast for you before you decided to move to the Galapagos?
Going really fast. Yeah, I mean, so busy. Like I was just busy
Yes.
all the time,
Yes,
like, and when you're busy, I feel like time moves a lot faster, and people who are busy never have enough time, right? And
that's
so
right.
it's interesting how that works. But yeah, for sure, I was like just I don't I I remember that I had like a meditation practice, and I try to think back because I can't even remember like when I ever actually did it. And I'm sure I must have done it like in the mornings, like before I started my day or whatever. But I'm like, was I even present in my meditation? Like, was I even present when I was like trying to take care of myself? I was just going through the motions basically with everything, whether it was class or like, going out and drinking with my friends, like, or going doing my meditate, like trying to do my like self-care practices and stuff too. Like it just felt like every moment had to be filled with something. And so
Yes.
I never actually had like I actually wrote something while I was in Galapagos for the first time, that I was like a stream of consciousness of like, nobody knows how to do nothing. Like, what
No.
does nothing mean? Like, if somebody told you you cannot do anything, like you can't look at your phone, you can't read, you can't write, you're literally just gonna sit and do nothing, but not fall asleep either. Like, how many people would be able to do that, that's what the island really like kind of forces you to do, because there's not that much to do there, and it's very small, so you kind of like go to all the places pretty quickly, and then within the first 2 weeks you're like, okay, we've done everything. It's like, what do
Yes.
we do now? There was just a lot of time that we didn't have anything to do, and so like obviously we did fill it with other things, but like there was literally just a lot of sitting on the beach, like
Yes.
doing nothing. And it's like, that's really hard. That's even hard for me to comprehend now that I have like all these other moving parts and businesses to run and things like that. But like when I think back to it, it was like that was just such a potent moment of time for me. And like I said, completely changed the course of my life. And so, not to say that like that's what everyone should do, is just like go sit your ass on the beach and everything will be fine. But I don't know. I have to wonder, like, if you gave
Yes.
yourself time to do nothing, what might come out of it?
Yes, this is why I call it sitting in your shit, because shit doesn't have to mean literal shit where it's like stinky and bad and yucky. It can. It
Hmm.
definitely does. But sitting in your shit is just sitting with yourself. Like I am the person I like to spend the most time with. I know people watching this probably like selfish bitch. It's fine. I'll take it. Because like you said, there was a time where I couldn't hear myself because I was so booked
Exactly.
and busy and I was so overextended, and I did that to myself. I allowed that
Hmm.
to happen. And so the reason why I asked that is because I was very similar. And so that's a pattern that I notice with people who don't have presence is they're like, my life is so busy and so full that they
Yep.
glamorize when they
Hmm.
realize that that's actually not making me happy, it's just making me fucking busy. That's not the same.
Exactly.
Because you can be busy, like you said, and happy. That's different. And because that busyness and happiness fulfills you, you naturally have those meditative states. You naturally have
Mm.
those moments where you're like, this is a non negotiable. I'm taking care of myself because now it's sustainable and you made it a part of your foundational beliefs. The other thing I was curious about you being busy was like, for me, in that period of my life, I felt like I said, I was phoning it in. I was in college and I'm just like doing it. I wasn't really trying
Oh
that
yeah.
as hard as I could. I know that
Yeah.
sounds shitty. Sorry, mom and dad, for spending all that money. But, in the interesting part of it is, and this is going to be a very triggering thing, I think, to say, is that for some of us, we can phone it in and still be semi-successful. We can get
Oh,
by.
for sure.
Yeah. And so when you went to the Galapagos and you had this like 3-month reprieve of like, I'm committing to this, it doesn't sound like you had it all planned out. It doesn't sound like you had like all your finances planned out, what was going to happen after the 3 months. And I'm saying this intentionally because a lot of time when you choose to detach from all of the we'll call unhealthy attachments that you have, it can feel like you're doing something wrong. And in that way, you also don't feel like you can take a risk on yourself because you don't know your fucking self. And
Hmm.
so for me, it's very interesting hearing you tell this story because it was like you drink from a if my perception is you drink from a fire hose. You were like, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna hear myself, I'm gonna take a risk, and it
Right.
does feel like that. It does feel
Mm.
like that when you're like, I'm not going to take this life any fucking more. And it
Mm.
feels like you're doing all the wrong things. It feels like someone's going to ground you for misbehavior. It just feels really, really foreign because now you're like, that doesn't work for me. And I don't know what does. So now I'm going to jump out of a plane. It feels that way. Not literally. If you want to jump out of a plane, that's great. I have adrenaline too. but I'm using it as a metaphor. It can feel very trepidatious and scary, but sometimes in that scary is like, it can't get any worse.
Exactly.
So I'm curious. So after that 3 months, you get offered this job. How do you become coach, mentor, I help entrepreneurs lady? How do you do that?
Yeah. So, yeah, this is how the story goes, right? So I get offered this job to teach English, and I have literally zero qualifications to teach English. Like, I did not study education, quite literally. Like, on the list of, like requirements for the job, the only one I could have checked off is that my native tongue is English. Like, it was, whew, it was and I only said yes. So the guy hired me on the spot, basically. And I was like, I said yes because I was like, well, shit, I don't have anything else to do. And I want to keep living on this island, and you're going to pay me to live on this island? Like, hell yeah. So I said yes. And I was like, and I told him in the interview, mind you, I'm like, this is my last day of school for college, and my friends are waiting outside for me on the beach. And I'm like in a bikini in a sarong, and
I
this
love
man
this.
hires me on the spot. So this is also just like the vibe of the island too.
Great.
But anyway, so I'm like, I'm a good like I can learn anything. Like I'm not that's why my Instagram is Lina Learning, because that's something that I'm like, I'm always gonna be learning. And that's like something that I just know that no matter what person I am, what version of myself, I'll always be learning. And I'm good at like sitting down and like taking in information and being able to apply it. And
You're a
so I
good
told him, I was
learner.
like, yeah, I'm a good learner. And I was like, listen,
Yeah.
I can figure it out. Like, I'll be able to do it. And so he hired me. And so then I come back to the island. I have this job. I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing, but I basically am just faking it the entire time. And my students are great. Like, I thank God that my coworker, the only other English teacher, she just so happened to be close, a little bit older than me, very close in my age, and she had experience teaching and an education degree. So she helped me learn how to teach, and then I helped her like learn the ways of the island, which was cool. She's still one of my best friends to this day.
Oh, that's nice.
Anyway, so I had no idea what the hell I was doing. After that year, I was like, I am not going to continue teaching English because this is not for me. It's clearly like 1 year was enough. But I found that energy of life that I wanted in my life. I was like, I want to be living here. I want to have the freedom to travel, because that's, again, like I said, road trips were always my thing. And I just know that like travel for me is something that immediately brings me into presence, because you don't really start, you're not really worrying about all these extra things except for like what's right in front of you, is what I've found. And so travel is really important for me, for like my soul in general, and getting out in nature and things like that. So I had this kind of like these non-negotiables, if you want to say that. And I was like, all right, how the hell, what am I going to do in order to meet these non-negotiables? Trust that I had to experience before I got to this point was that, so my contract for teaching ended in December 2019. And then I went home to the US to visit my family because I hadn't seen them in a year. And at this point, I'm engaged to my now husband. I went back to the US, and then that's when COVID hit. So then I was stuck in the US. My husband was in Galapagos, or my fiance at the time was in Galapagos. So we were separated for basically our entire engagement. So
Oh
that was a
my,
lot of contrast. Yeah, that was really hard. And because I was stuck in the US, I was like, well, I'm not doing anything. I might as well like get a job. And I actually got this job like a month before, because I had only planned to stay for a couple months, but I got it like right before the lockdowns happened. And it was literally a job that, like, when I look back at it, I'm like, I can't believe I made that decision. But it was like one of those things that like when you go back to where you're comfortable, you kind of like revert back to like these old patterns or something.
uh-huh.
And I just applied to an Olive Garden. I don't know if you know the restaurant Olive Garden, but
Yes.
just, for me, it could not be more out of alignment. Like, unhealthy food, terrible, like just like work environment, not what I wanted to be in at all. But I did it because I was like, oh, I'm only going to do it for a couple months and I'll just like make some quick money and get out of there. And at this time, I still hadn't thought of the idea of like having my own business. And so, yeah, so I worked at an Olive Garden. And because Olive Garden was deemed essential during the lockdowns or whatever, I still had a job throughout that whole time. And so that time, those few months of 2020, obviously like everyone in the world is experiencing so much stuff is going on. And for me, it was like definitely a time of just like extreme contrast because I was back at home living with my parents, working in my hometown with a bunch of people that were just like, they had never left the hometown. And I like just felt like, oh my God, I do not fucking belong here. And I'm engaged to a person who's thousands of miles away. I want to be living with him back on the island. Then there's just so much there where I'm like, this is not gonna be okay. Like I'm just not okay with this.
Mm.
And so I think the difference between then and like when I was in college was that in 2020 I had the experience of living my dream life, and then I went back to like living like how I thought I was supposed to live and whatever. And I was like, okay, this was like the last fucking straw. Like I finally
Yeah.
had the consciousness to be like, oh my God, this is it. Like I'm never doing this shit again. And so that's when I started looking for opportunities to work online because I wanted that freedom to travel. I wanted that, yeah, that like financial ability to make money wherever I am and things like that. So that's when I was introduced to a business called Anagic, and that's where Alkalized Abundance comes in. Is that Anagic is a water ionizer company, and so a water ionizer is this like machine that you can hook up to your tap, and it creates hydrogen water, which is like a big craze right now too. And it's really good for you because it is full of antioxidants. So it's just something that like you drink. Obviously, you have to drink water. Everyone drinks water. And
Family.
for me, everyone needs it. It made sense. It was a product that made sense to me because it's like something that you buy once, it's sustainable, something that you hook up to your tap, and then it creates all these different types of waters so that you can replace different things in your home, like cleaners. I replace my entire skincare is literally just water. Yeah, so this machine produces all these different pHs, and then it produces this amazing drinking water where you're constantly taking in antioxidants, which basically allows your body to like fix itself, right?
Wow.
So to put it very very simply. And so for me, I was like, all right, check sustainability, check holistic health, making the world a better place, right? Clean water, healthy water, hell yeah. And then not only that, but then the compensation plan that came with this, it's a network marketing business, so they have their own compensation plan attached to it. And I was like, oh my God, this is my golden fucking ticket. Like this is something like it's a high quality product. I love the product. I would use the product even if I didn't make any money off of it. I'll never not drink this water again. And I get to make money off of anyone else whose life I get to help. And then
Mhm.
Alkalized Abundance is the community that I'm a part of. So like it's people from all over the world, and it's all these people who have the same mindset of like I want to have the freedom to, and it's either to travel or to be present with my children or whatever, and
Yeah.
whatever your version of freedom is. And I get to be a part of this community, and that's where I started coaching at first. Was that I was like, hey, I'm going to learn how to be an entrepreneur. Do you want to come do this with me? And of course I'm still learning because I didn't have any business experience. Like I studied environmental science and marine science. And so I've just been learning this as I go. And it sustained me after 2020. It sustained, I did that for 3 years, and that was all I did. And it was like enough for me to live, enough for me to travel. I took road trips. I did my yoga teacher certification. I lived in the Galapagos. And like now that we're living part-time in California, I'm also working on a sailboat doing what my original dream was to, I wanted to do outdoor education. So like I'm very nature oriented in that sense. And so I get to follow that too while also still building this business. And it's something that is what really sparked like the introduction to this idea of like, whoa, you can just like start your own business like on like what? It's like there, you can just do it. Like it had never, that was never a possibility for me. I had never been introduced to something like that before. And so when I got introduced to this business, to Enagic, when I really started to realize, like, whoa, okay, there's like a whole world out there of possibility that I had never even considered. And that, like, you don't have to be like, I want to say, like, quote unquote, qualified. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, you can just kind of be yourself and like get paid to be yourself. Like, that's basically what I'm doing. And that felt really good. And then that kind of allowed me the creative freedom to start other businesses, which is how now my husband and I also have a surf and yoga tourism business
Yes.
based in Galapagos. And so it kind of allowed me that like creative freedom of like, yo, you don't have to follow the fucking rules. You can create your own rules. You can do whatever you want. And like, yeah, you're going to still go through trial and tribulation, but at least you're following what feels good for you and you're following that joy. And like ever since then, I have never looked back, and I absolutely refuse to work in any sort of way that doesn't align with my actual values, which are sustainability, holistic health, reciprocity, like just making the world a better place and allowing people to find their joy as well.
Wow. That is such a compelling story. It is. So it's fascinating to hear how anybody got to the place of anything. Like if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a daycare specialist, like it's just fascinating to hear what drives
Mm-hmm.
people to be who they are. I find it even more fascinating that you went home and the universe was like, you're falling back into patterns. We're going to literally hold everything that is in your new life away from you. We're going to hold
I
your fiance
know.
away from you. They're like dangling, the universe is like dangling the carrot, being like, if you want this, you can have it. You can
Yeah.
have this life if you like it. But now you're going
Mm.
to have FOMO of everything that allowed you to be present. And
Hmm.
so it was almost like the universe was like, here are your choices. And because I think that people oftentimes feel like they wind up wherever they are, but there has
Mm.
always been some sort of fork in the road that's like, you made a choice.
You
You
make,
made a
yes,
choice.
100%.
And that's really, really hard. It's really, really hard to look at yourself and be like, I shit the bed and I made that choice.
Mm.
Right. And so during that time period, you're saying that you were doing something you didn't even want to do, waitressing, and, it was so misaligned and incongruent for you, the food products, the way that you were engaging with people, like it was just not
Mm.
aligned. And so you also identified all the reasons why moving into this trajectory, going towards the network marketing has also kind of spilled over into all of the reasons why you like doing what you do, right? You have
Mm.
shared all about your holistic health perspective and like how important it is for you to be somebody who's what I would consider very nature forward.
Yeah.
I consider myself that way too, right? I consider myself, my body, as somebody who really is critical about the things that go into it. And so all of the lights that you have, right? It's given you freedom. It's revealed to you your true sense of presence. It's also revealed to you when you're not in a true sense of presence, right?
Mm.
It's giving you the opportunity to start other businesses. It's giving you what I hear is confidence and a
Mm.
state of purpose, which you say you're always driving for. And it always sounds like what you're doing is driven by a deeper sense of inherent passion of who you are. And so
Mm.
all of these things to consider of like, here's why I do this. This is why I love it. Here's why it compels me and will continue to be sustainable because they're inherent values of yours.
Mm.
What do you dislike about what you do? If those are all your likes, right?
Mm.
It would be lovely. It would be so glamorous if all life was like, it's all great and there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong.
Everything's
However,
perfect.
exactly, right? I know we all want to go for joy and ease, but
Mm.
sometimes what we talked about earlier, kind of coming full circle here, those moments of desperation, disappointment, grief, depression, anger, whatever it is, those are like, I consider them like phone calls from your future self being like, there's something in here for you. So this rage for you, you got to figure out
Mm.
where you're indulging it, where it's blocking your joy, and how you can learn from it to expand your joy, right? It's like you can't have true happiness without appreciation for the fact of what the opposite of happiness is, right? We
Mm.
relish happiness, we relish the likes because we know how shitty the fucking dislikes and the opposite of happiness is. So,
Mm-hmm.
what are the things about what you do that maybe aren't so glamorous and you don't really love?
Oof. Great question too. Um, well, for sure, like I being an entrepreneur, especially having no experience in business and literally learning on the fly, is that it's volatile. Like it's not like I haven't been in a place where I'm making like consistent money every single month. And it's always been like, I'm kind of like teetering on the edge of like, ooh, like what's gonna happen this time,
Yeah.
But but it's also like think about my business, like I started it in 20 at the end of 2020, like December 2020. So we're looking at like about 3 years.
Mm,
And it's like it's actually kind of like a 3-year-old human. Like it's volatile. It has so many different emotions. There's still so much shit that's going on. And it's a lot about me and like what's happening within myself because at this point in time, like my business is just basically me. Like I'm doing the marketing, I'm doing, the connecting with people, I'm doing the coaching. I don't outsource any of this stuff. And so it's a lot of fucking work, which
Yeah.
I go back and forth between it's like, well, choose your work. Like I think no matter what, you're gonna have to work hard in most things in life, whether or not you want to be a doctor or an entrepreneur or whatever. So like choose your hard. All right. I would rather choose the hard that allows me to follow my dreams any day. But the fact that it's like I'm learning these things on the fly, half the time I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I just keep trialing and erroring, and some things work, some things don't. Some months are better than others. And sometimes I wonder, like, oh my God, should I go get a 9 to 5? Like, should I you know, like just like plug myself back into like the societal like success story and follow that? Like, would I be happier if I did that? Would life be easier if I did that? And so there's always these like, there's a lot of room for like questioning yourself when you're on your own path because nobody else has done it before. And so it's not like there's like a b c d thing you have to follow. So there's a lot of just like putting one foot in front of the other and then like getting able to see 10 feet more in front of you, and then you have to put another foot in front and then you can see 10 more feet, but you can't actually see like what the end product is going to look like, even though I have vision, like my own visions and dreams and things that I'm working towards. Sometimes it's scary, and it's like I deal with fear on a daily basis, a fear of like putting myself out there, like getting on things like this. Like I was nervous, like even though it's like I know I can do this and I've done podcasts before and I show my face all the time. It's like, ooh, okay, like I'm about to be vulnerable right now, and you have to put yourself out there to do these things.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a level where, or a sense of, obviously when you're vulnerable, like vulnerability basically means that like you're open for attack, and you're also open for success and for love. And so you have to like be able to balance both of those things, and you're going to get rejection, you're going to get the hard stuff too, but you're also going to get the stuff that's like so that makes it so worth it. So yeah, those are the things that I would say I don't like, I guess, or like the struggles that come with it. And like personally right now, like to be completely honest, I'm in this state where I'm kind of like, okay, like I feel like I'm like hitting a wall of some sort, and there's some block that I'm trying to work through, but I actually haven't even been able to fully identify what the block is. And so it's just so much work internally as well. Like your business, I feel like really tends to reflect like what's going on within yourself too, especially in these like beginning years. And so yeah, it's definitely not like a walk in the park every day. That's for sure.
Yes,
um
I agree with you. I think the thing that I hear you saying is for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think is true. We're not selling a widget. It's not like, here, have this cup. I've made
yeah.
plenty of them. Have all of them. I have several left over. We are offering transformation, which is not a
Mm,
time-bound experience, and it's completely outside of our control as a coach. It's completely inside the control of the individual. And
mm,
as a coach, it sounds very similar to you, and if I'm wrong, just correct me. As it is for me, which is like I got into this work to make myself better because I was like,
mm-hmm,
I'm feeling like shit all
mm,
the time. And I don't know why, right? And then as a it kind of parlayed off into, well, if this works for me, there's got to be other people that are just like, why am I so unhappy in my nice life? And where is the answer? Why isn't this in a book somewhere? Like it was just so
mm,
confusing to me of like, am I the only one that feels like this? And so as a byproduct, when that is how you lead your business, by understanding your own edge and understanding your own capacity to be able to be in those moments of block and then go inwards is very challenging, because what
mm-hmm.
that lends itself to is the rate and the way that your business evolves is dependent upon whoever the fuck you are at that moment. And so
Exactly.
I relate to you seriously because about 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, I pulled my whole business down because I had a trauma in my life that required my full attention. And
Mm,
my father passed away. And after he passed away, I completely changed. And then my business was so out of whack. I was like,
yeah.
I don't even know who this person is. I don't even know what to how to
Mm-hmm.
update this because this is so far from who I am that by the time I got into our mastermind, that's what I was doing. I was working through my block of like, oh, it's
Mm,
all different now. It's all fucking different now because I'm different.
mm,
And that's a lot
right.
to take in. And it's not just from a business place, right? Going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, when you realize that you're different and that your presence isn't held the same, that's super discombobulating. It's
Mm,
disorienting. You're like, what do you mean I don't know how to be me? I'm fucking me. Your brain is literally like, does not compute. And then your heart breaks, and it's just a compound effect of all these things. And so, yeah, it is challenging when you take ownership of your life. And that's what I hear you
yeah.
saying. You're like, listen, I'm not going to play by their rules anymore. And I fucking appreciate that because it's the same experience I had. And
Mm,
I also hear, and I'm curious about this, is that something that you encourage in your work with other people, right? Like I hear you say it in on your website, right? Like challenging the status quo and whatnot. But really, I'm curious if, and I'm going to assume yes, but I'm curious if you give people that permission to just say, fuck the rules, start from zero. How would you run this, right? Like the most
mm,
profound thing my therapist said to me in the past few years was, fuck the rules on what love should look like. What does love look like to you? And then my brain
mm.
went, fuck, I don't even know.
I don't know
And
exactly.
then that's the fucked up part. You're like, why the fuck don't I know what love means to me? So I'm curious if
Mm,
that is something that you're really inviting people to do, is to say, start from the bottom, start over even if you need to.
absolutely. And I think that that's a really great question. Like, what does love mean to you? And you can apply that in like many different ways. But I think for me, a lot of the times it's like, well, what does your dream life look like? Like
Yes.
if you could live your dream life, like what would you do? And a lot of people are like, let's just say you had all the money in the world and you could work whatever job you wanted, you could sell whatever you wanted, you could create whatever you wanted, you could spend your time however you wanted. What would you do? People are like, what? I've never thought
Yes.
about that before. And
Yes.
that's
And
a
you know
very
what's
like, whoa, holy
yes.
shit, I don't know what I want.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, what's really interesting about that is even when you, in my experience, when you invite someone who is at a fresh threshold of realizing their presence and that they would like it to be different, is that when you ask people that question, there's still those parameters in their brain. It's like,
Mm,
who would take care of my kids? No, the kids are taken care of. What did your dream like look like? Well,
yeah,
then, who's gonna clean my house? No, the house is clean, right?
yeah.
It's like it's a challenge to get people to fuck the system and say,
Hmm.
if it looked exactly only how you wanted it. And
Hmm.
that's what I'm interested in how you do that in your program and how and what you
Mm.
offer people to experience.
I'm going to use one of my clients as an example because she's coming to mind right now. And she works a classic like corporate job, right? And she like makes pretty good money. She's like kind of chilling, but she hates it. And
Yeah,
it's like, I I don't want to be, but she likes how it's like, she has the stability. She has, she can like depend on this income for all of these things that she needs to take care of, which I totally understand. Like if you need to
yep,
be like safe in that sense, because it's a lot to hold if you like
sure.
quit your job and want to start over. There's all that your nervous system has to be very like attuned to being able to hold all of that. And if you really wanted to like start over. And so I'm not saying that like I don't encourage my clients to be like, quit your job and move and sell your house and move this and whatever. Like you can, like I would have done like I think I'm pretty extreme in the way that I make changes. So
Yeah.
I would do that, but I'm not gonna say that that's best for everyone. Like for her, for example, like she was like, well, she used to live in LA and she loved living in LA and she like vibed there. She had great friends there. She loved the people there. She loved it. And then because of her job, she moved to Charlotte and in North Carolina, and like
I
that's where you live. Oh no
yeah,
way! Maybe you could connect because
maybe.
she hates it. she was
Yeah.
like, she was like the people I've struggled making friends. I've struggled meeting people. I like the weather here is not as nice as it is in LA. Like there's not as much nature around. There's no beach,
Yep.
and she just like had all these reasons why like she wasn't vibing with Charlotte, and that was like something that was causing her a lot of issues because she was like, I really feel like I was vibing in this other place, and then I thought I could like enjoy being here too, but I'm like really struggling, and I feel like I'm trying really hard, and so I would try to like leave little breadcrumbs of like, well, like what did you like to do in LA? You know, like how can we like bring these things in to where like because there's a really fine line, and I think this is where like the work comes in of like being grateful for what you have and like really like the presence of like where you are, even if you don't like it, like where can you find the joy even if you're like not 100% there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And also like having like one foot in that gratitude but then the other foot in like desire for like, okay, well what are we moving toward, like what do we want to like, do you want to make a change, like is this causing you enough contraction that like you feel like the change would be better to like move into like where you really want to go. So we worked a lot with that. And then another thing was that like, you know, she was like she's very creative, and she makes these amazing, she'll like buy thrifted furniture and then like flip it and like turn it into something absolutely gorgeous. Or she's also like a very talented seamstress as well, and like makes her own clothes and stuff. And I'm like, girl, like she's like, yeah, like I've made a few things, like I've thought about selling them on Etsy, but like I don't have enough time to be creative, and like sometimes I just don't do it or whatever. And so sometimes it's like, but I could tell that that was what really brought her joy. She was like, she loved doing that, she loved being creative, she loved that, having that like kind of flow for herself outside of her like corporate like more masculine vibe job.
Yeah.
And so we also practice that of like how can you create that space for yourself to be more creative, and like if that's what's really bringing you joy, like I'm not saying quit your job and like go full time on selling furniture on Etsy, but like
Yeah.
also if that's what's really bringing you joy and you're in, and that's like where you find your creative self-expression, like you need to make time for that. Like don't say that you're too busy because of work and then put aside the things that actually bring you joy. So there's a lot of this like balancing those things, I guess. Yeah, like you still need to pay your bills. I get it. But how can you prioritize time for what brings you joy? And and
Yeah.
then maybe if you follow those little breadcrumbs of those things that bring you joy, maybe one day you'll get to a point where you're like, oh, I could go part-time at my job because my pieces are selling for so much now, and I've gained this, you know, who knows what could come of it, or like, oh, actually maybe I can afford to move to LA because of this or that or the other, you know. And it's like I find that you can't, like when you follow those little breadcrumbs, let's call them breadcrumbs of joy, like those little sparks of things that like spark your interest or spark your creativity or whatever it may be that makes you feel good. It's always very interesting how things will unfold
Mm-hmm.
around that when you choose to follow them and then choose to see where it might lead you. And I think a lot of people will only do like the very like minimal or the very basic thing for the joy, but
Yeah.
not like kind of follow it a little bit deeper. Like there's a golden thread there that I
Yep.
think you can follow. And if you create the space and the time in your life in order to do that. So that's one of the things that we really worked on with her was like
Mm.
finding that balance, because I like in my heart of hearts I'm like, quit your job, like fuck all that shit, you know. But I'm like, but I know that that's not going to work for you, so it's like why would I suggest that, you know. But
Yes.
she could do that, but I'm not going to be like, oh, you're doing it wrong if you don't quit your corporate job, like no. So but how can we still like do these things that we might not like all that much but that like make us feel safe, and then but still find the things that kind of push us and expand us. And I think there's different layers of comfort zones. I've actually done a masterclass on this, is like there's your comfort zone, you know, that's like your like full comfort, and then there's the things that like push you a little bit, and then there's like your fear zone where like that's just going to put you into fight or flight. And it's like for her, if she were to quit her job, that would put her into fight or flight, and then that's not really helping her at all, you know. So like
Yes.
where are those things that are in between the comfort and like the actual like fight or flight, there's like this sweet spot of like learning and expansion that you can kind of lean into. So that's what I like to teach.
Wow, I love it. I love that. I love that comfort zone thing. That is a really good tool because I think that as human beings, we're grossly underinformed about our nervous systems. And I hear that that's what you're talking about in your client's example, right? Not everybody, Tony Robbins calls it burning the boat. I
Mm,
wasn't designed to burn the boat. I had to get to a point of my project management career where I was ready to leave and I felt poised and stable, because otherwise you're just like take and replace. You're taking one stress of like, I
Exactly.
hate this, it's terrible, and putting it into a new stress of how am I going to make my next paycheck and pay my bills.
Mm,
I hear you talking about introducing your clients to their own capacity and
mm,
their personality, because our world is very rigid. It's very rigid. There's a lot of right and wrongs, yes or no, this, not that. Those are extremes. In my perspective, and what I work on with my clients as well, is the capacity, right? Your capacity to forgive someone is not going to be the same as someone else's capacity to forgive someone.
mm,
You
mhm,
know, it's just like they say, different strokes for different folks, but a lot of it is contingent on your personality. And I love that you talk about purpose. I would marry that, for my own sake of conversation, with passion, right?
mm,
People are often deterred by passion because we grew up in a puritanical society that says that, we shouldn't trust our feelings. And so when we get that inclination of, I do hate this job, I do
mm,
think I need to leave, we often don't know what to do with it because we don't feel allowed to feel that feeling. So we
right.
don't feel allowed to feel that feeling. We stop there. It's like,
Mm,
I'm not allowed. But if we allowed ourselves to say, let me just follow that feeling. Teal Swan is someone who's on YouTube, and she says this a lot, follow that feeling. And if we allowed ourselves to follow that feeling, we would run right into our capacity being like, bitch, you are much more adventurous than this. Quit that fucking job. You only
mhm,
feel like you're not capable of doing this because you've never done it before. And you don't
mm,
know the pathway to do it. You don't know anyone that's done it, right? And so I really appreciate you pointing out how you walk with people into allowing them to see what is safe for them is the best starting point that they could ever begin from in making decisions and living
mhm,
authentically from their presence. So if somebody is watching this right now and they're like, I don't know if I need Lena, but I might need Lena. Who would somebody be that's watching this that might need you? What would you say to them? Okay, if you're thinking this or if you feel like this, how would you prescribe yourself as a viable resource to somebody watching this?
That's a good question. I've never thought about this before. I would say if you're feeling like, I want to say it's stuck, like if you're like, I know that there's something better out there, but you're not quite sure what direction to go, and you're probably experiencing this indecision of like, oh, I don't know, should I do this? Should I do that? I'm not quite sure. Then that's something that I feel like I'm very experienced in from my own story that I shared with you, which is, you pretty much got most of the story, is that like I have been able to tune into my intuition and like follow that feeling, like you just said.
Mm,
And so if you're struggling to follow that feeling, or maybe you're not even sure what you're feeling, but you're just feeling like, oh, aha, like this is not what I want to be doing, or this is so unaligned, or like this lots of contraction happening.
mm,
Maybe and also in a bit of like fight or flight mode. Maybe you don't even know what that means, but you're just feel these, tough things, and it's a day-to-day situation. Then that is kind of like my genius zone, I think, is like where you already know that there's something better, like you have that awareness, you have some sort of awareness about yourself, knowing that you might not be meant to be where you are right now, but you feel like there's something else out there for you. Then, and even if it's just something small, like finding the joy in like the day-to-day things, right? Or something as major as quitting your job. Like
yeah.
I'm
We're moving to
there
the
to support,
Galapagos.
or moving, yeah, moving to an island, and saying fuck the world for 3 months. I'm there to support you through that. Yeah, that's where I would say is kind of my sweet spot in there, is like helping people move through those blockages. Like I said in the beginning, mostly women. I tend to connect better with women, so I would say helping women move through those blockages, also because it's like I can share from my own experiences being a woman as well. Yeah, I would be
Hmm.
curious to connect, and I feel like there's many different avenues that you can take in order to kind of find what expression that you want to share with the world, whether
Hmm.
that's through business or just creativity, or just taking a walk in nature and being able to feel peace for once, or a good night's sleep or whatever. That's the kind of person that I would say like come hang out with me.
Hmm. You, as you're talking, I'm like, she's an adventure artist. Like you are someone that
Ooh, I
helps
love
people
that.
design their adventure, right? And
Yeah,
that's what
exactly.
I experienced leaving my job as, right? That was an adventure I'd never explored before. So here we go.
Mhm.
And so if you're an adventure artist out there and you got that little inclination that you want to take an adventure that maybe you feel underexplored, or what did you say before, Lena? You didn't have any experience in teaching English other than the fact that it was your native language. If you feel inexperienced about it, sounds like Lena might be the person to help you design your adventure. Thank you so much for being here, Lena. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on living a holistically healthy life, because I hear that it's like about creating balance in all of the areas. That's really what I hear and what you're doing and what you're offering to the world, and you're so bravely giving them. It feels like a hug. It feels like an invitation of like, really live your life
Yeah.
happily. Dare to be happy is like what I hear
Mm.
Lena is about. Like, fuck the system. Because, and I was just actually talking about this with my therapist today, little divulging there, is that there is a sense where it's like, if we're not constantly talking about, the horrendous that happens in life, then somehow we are not caring about those things. And I simply
Mm.
don't believe that's true. It's extremism again. You're not allowed to be happy unless you're constantly sad as well. So,
Hmm.
for those that are watching this right now and want to reach out to you, what do you have going on? Where can people find you? Where can they get more Lena?
Yeah. So I would say probably Instagram is the best place to like get a vibe and see what's going on.
And that is,
My
I'll put it in the show notes, but give them your handle.
It's at Lina Learning with an underscore after learning. Lina
Yeah, at the
Learning.
end.
Uh-huh, at the end. And yeah, I have my link tree in there. So a couple different things that I have kind of like evergreen things that are going on is working with me in business. So if you are somebody who's also holistic health minded and you want a water ionizer in your life, if you purchase a water ionizer from me, then you become part of Alkalized Abundance and you're supported by me as a coach and also the community as a whole, and learning from ground zero of being an entrepreneur to however high you want to go. And it's kind of a beautiful, I call it like the entrepreneur starter pack. Like if you've never started your own business or have no idea where to begin, there's all the training in there that you need for free. So that's an option to work with me as well, one on one, also in a community aspect. And then right now we have our 2025 bookings open for surf and yoga retreats and trips in the Galapagos Islands. So we're booking from December through May of 20, well, December 2024 through May of 2025 right now. So if you want to come and hang out on the islands and go surfing or do yoga or whatever, like please come hang out. That link there is in my bio as well. And our Galapagos business is called Lava Wave Surf Galapagos. So that's the Instagram handle is Lava Wave Surf Galapagos. You can check us out there as well. And also in my link in my bio and my Instagram is a link to my free masterclass of the comfort zone expansion. So
Oh,
it's a
cool.
free 1 hour masterclass, and it also has a 22-page ebook that I created that goes along with the masterclass. So you can watch the masterclass, and then there's like a debrief integration ebook, which I think is like it's actually very powerful if I might toot my own
Yeah.
horn.
Say it. Say it. Don't
I'm
be
like
confused about it. It's
I'm like,
very powerful.
should I charge for this? No, no, no. It's fine. It's free.
Yeah,
Um,
you can.
so
You
that's
should.
that's
Feel
also
it.
something free in there, a freebie. And I'm actually in the process of creating another coaching container, like outside of business, but more so like my Survive to Thrive signature blueprint that I did before. I launched that last year, I think. And so I'm thinking about doing another launch this year. So yeah,
Awesome.
basically if you follow me on Instagram, I got a lot of stuff going on there. The link in my bio has links to different things and you can check me out there.
Awesome. So before we wrap this up today, is there anything else you would like to add? Anything that you would like to have people be imparted with before they leave? Any words of wisdom? Anything you want people to walk away from this from? Have at it.
Well, just the thing that's coming to mind is like I just hope that you can take away from this that like there's so many different aspects of yourself, and we kind of touched on this I think throughout the whole podcast, but you're going to show up as a different version of yourself. I mean, every day, but but even like year to year, like looking back in the last 3 years, how much I've grown is like, I hardly even recognize the person that I was 3 years ago. Right. And so I just hope that you can take away from this that like you are allowed to be whoever you are right now. And you're also allowed to change, and you're allowed to not know where the hell you're going or what the fuck you're doing, but just put one foot in front of the other and trust yourself, trust your intuition, trust your higher power, whatever it may be, all of those things combined, and see what happens. I think life is good. Like Shannon started this, like people are inherently good. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I also believe that the underlying baseline energy of life is good as well. So life is good, life is beautiful, and all of us have access to that.
Woo!
Enjoy it.
Your energy is so beautiful, my friend. Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
being here. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I can't thank you enough.
No, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. This is unlike any other podcast I've had before, so I appreciate this invitation to join you on Dirty Pretty.
Woo! I'll take it. And for those of you that are listening and are watching, as always, thank you for being here. Be good to yourself, for fuck's sake. Live honestly in the dirty pretty of your life and choose to do the next right thing for you. Until next time.
Bye.